Thank you very much, gentlemen. Welcome to MSI Cooldown, where we look back at our first day here in the play-in knockout stage. I'm Dash, joined by Frosk and Mark Z. How you two doing after a solidly long day here of 2 best-of-5s?
It wasn't that long. I think the wild card
TL helped us out there.
Regions kind of got a little bit taken care of.
Yeah, I mean, we were expecting double 3-0s. So the fact that this most recent series even went to 4 games was a bit of a surprise, and it was nice to see Vega kind of come out with that initial punch in game 1.
But we were having this conversation, and I was kind of checking online, and it seemed to be the same thing for the community. Like, that 3-1 looked more convincing than the 3-0 from TL. Because I felt like when Flash Wolves did find their ground, when they were ahead, that they were absolutely just slapping Vega around.
Yeah, I mean, like, okay, you lost game 1 to a Vayne mid with a Karthus that was kind of getting flexed around, all this weird stuff. Like, okay, you lose a game to that, and it still took a long time, and the enemy team got all the objectives, and you were still putting up a good fight. And then you steamroll them the next 3 games, and it's like, well, who cared what happened in game 1? That was an anomaly.
Yeah, in particular, that 3rd game of the series was an absolute smashing. This time around, as Spawn mentioned, there were maybe a couple opportunities for Vega, with the Rift Herald and whatnot, but ultimately, they weren't able to realize any of those advantages within the game, and it was another solid one for Flash Wolves.
And now it's just the measuring stick, just because Vega fell down here, they get another opportunity against the VCS. So I'm curious, like, VCS and LMS play a very similar high-tempo, very skirmish, fight-heavy style. So Vega theoretically got a really good feel for, like, kind of the tempo of the series tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, in general, though, we got to talk about Flash Wolves in the context of moving on, right? They are a very explosive team, I think, as we have seen here. But in particular, I want to talk about Betty in the bot lane, because there was a lot of focus around the bot lane for this squad and him as a carry.
We were saying Gadget was a player to watch, and he was a reason to watch the series because Betty destroyed him.
Yes.
And it was one of those things that, like, once the pick started stabilizing the bot lane, Betty really took over. His Ezreal was phenomenal. Was one of the main reasons that game 1 was even close, despite losing on it. Game 2 goes back to it, crushes on it, and then kind of just keeps running away from the series from there. Other people did step up at different times, but a lot of this did feel like it was keyed off of Betty.
Yeah, low econ ADC. Normally you don't see Betty as dominant in the lane phase, at least not domestically. Yeah, he can pull it out if he has a good matchup, but I think this was really just muscling and flexing on an opponent that wasn't ready, because usually it's just in these 5v5s, these 3v3s that Betty really starts to shine.
Right. And I think coupled with Betty's individual performance, of course, you have to look at his lane partner in Xiaoxi. Yes, in part the shot caller, main shot caller for the team, but just looking at the champion picks, almost all of them in service of helping Betty specifically either get ahead in the lane or provide him with an immense amount of protection for the team fights.
Yeah, I mean, especially this 3rd game. The Nautilus pick was absolutely disgusting, getting tons of kills in lane and then 1v2ing after that. Yeah, Betty was on Kai'Sa, and that's great, but it was really the Xiaoxi show for game 3.
And if you turn off the nameplates, that guy looks like Sword Art. These are very common picks for a very common playstyle that Sword Art would also bring back to the Flash Wolves. So yeah, the golden era has come and gone, but you can still see some of the fingerprints left over of such like a historic organization on what is such a young roster. When Hanabi and Betty went to the Flash Wolves to MSI, they were rookies.
And I think, go ahead.
I was gonna say, the funny thing was, after having such a great performance in games 1 through 3, it felt like Vega was like, we're gonna start killing Betty in game 4. And they ended up killing him 5 times, I believe it was.
Right.
But, usually they were losing the rest of the game as a result. So Betty felt like he kind of tilted them off the rift.
Yeah, very much so. And while Betty definitely stepped up here today, if we're going to talk about any concern, any small point of concern, personnel-wise for Flash Wolves, I think we would point our fingers towards Boogie. I mean, you look at Flash Wolves historically, and you're looking at a player like Kai'Sa, right? As an absolute star jungler. So already big shoes for someone like Boogie to fill, and he is very much a rookie, in particular on the international stage. And we saw a couple of indicators there of maybe some nerves throughout the series today.
I'm going to say it looked like calm problems to me. That Elder Dragon in particular really stands out. The fact that he went for the smite steal, when if he had gone for the team fight, it probably would have been a completely different story. I think it's just a very kind of solo queue mentality. This is an experience issue that the more time that this guy has with this roster, I think he'll start to fall in line.
And I think you could see that he had good lane ganks and a lot of the times set Betty up for some of those early kills and stuff like that. But when you come to the more complex calls, like you're saying, what do you do around like a stalled out Elder Dragon or at a Baron buff and those kinds of things? It does feel like that's where he struggles. Even I think it was like the last game he lost to Baron randomly. Like those are the kinds of things that as you move into the closer series coming up in the group stage, you need a very confident jungler because he's going to go up against so many who are used to being in those situations that he does have a little bit of leveling up to go.
Right, and to be fair, you don't run into those situations nearly as often as you practice a lane gank, right? You just simply don't get to a 41-minute Elder Drake that often on the competitive level, and in particular on the international stage. That said, what is your guys' feelings around Flash Wolves as a whole moving towards the group stage? How they might perform or maybe stack up against some of the teams awaiting them?
I think that they look pretty good for a best-of-1 format where they do have that kind of explosive ability to end a game against teams that, maybe they're better than you in a best-of-5, but if you get that kind of 2 to 3K gold lead, you can end that game very quickly. That's what you want to see in a best-of-1 format. It is a little concerning how much of their advantages, well, I shouldn't say concerning, but a question mark still about how many of these advantages they can get because there was so much like, 2v2 kills, and you just slam your opponent. Like, is that going to work versus Doublelift and Core JJ and, Perks and all the other people that you're going to be going up against in the bot lane? It's one of those things where you're saying, yeah, you dominated your opponent today, but you probably won't be dominating the upcoming games. So how are you going to get those 2K advantages to close the games?
In the same way that it's like really hard to draw a lot of concrete ideas from the TL series, I think the same thing should be said about the Flash Wolves. Yeah, it's impressive. Yeah, you can feel good about the momentum. Maybe fans get on their side. But ultimately, because of the caliber of opponent, you're not going to get those types of leads. It's not like Flash Wolves are going to come into IG and just blast them in the lane phase and be able to close out. And so unfortunately, we haven't seen on an international stage with this iteration of Flash Wolves, how do they play from behind? How do they play from even footing? Because if it's the same play style of, hey guys, let's try to skirmish and see what happens, you're doing that into a tournament with so much better, stronger, more experienced teams at exactly that play style.
And I think it was interesting when you said, Betty was a larger carry in this series than he sometimes is and got more resources than he typically does. Maybe that was just them kind of keying into what was working this series and just being like, all right, Betty's carrying, let's just put more eggs in his basket. But I want to see more out of Hanabi and how he interacts with the team, whereas for a lot of this series, he was kind of on an island and doing very well. But can he go up and they fight more of these 2v2s in the top lane? That does feel like we're in the meta for.
Going to take a moment to hear from the team themselves. For more on how Flash Wolves won the series, let's check in with Riv and their jungler.
Thank you very much. I am joined by Boogie, Flash, start over. Yep. Thank you very much. I am joined by Flash Wolves, Boogie, and G-Sun for translating. Thank you so much for joining us. Flash Wolves taking down Vega Squadron 3-1. Boogie, my first question for you. Games 1 and 2 seemed quite difficult, but games 3 and 4 were absolutely amazing. What kicked in for the team?
우선 승리 정말 축하드리고요. 사실 1경기, 2경기는 조금 힘들어 보였는데 3, 4경기는 굉장히 압도적으로 승리하셨어요. 어떤 변화가 왔을까요?
첫 게임은 제가 첫 국제대회다 보니까 너무 떨려서 손이 너무 떨려서 좀 힘들어했고 첫판 끝나니까 긴장 풀려서 그다음부터는 우리가 하는 플레이 했던 플레이 원하는 대로 했던 것 같아요.
So this is my first experience at international stage. So I was really nervous. My hands were shaking, but I got used to the stage on game 2, so I was able to pull some of the plays that I used to play in LMS.
And it kind of goes into my second question. You joined Flash Wolves at the beginning of this season. As a jungler, what do you bring to this historic and storied team of Flash Wolves?
네, 이제 그러면 올해 이제 플래시 wolves에 조인하셨는데 그러면 이제 좀 역사가 깊고 이런 강팀에 조인하면서 정글러로서 어떤 플레이를 보여주고 계신가요?
일단 우리 팀원이 너무 잘해서 일단 받쳐주는 걸로 일단 연습을 하고 있어요.
I mean, all my teammates are such a great players. I'm just supporting them.
That's very nice to say. And I have to ask you, now you have SKT, IG, G2, and Team Liquid coming up. Who are you most excited to play against?
네, 이제 그룹 스테이지 가면 SKT, IG, G2, 팀 리퀴드를 만날 수 있는데 가장 기대되는 팀이 어딘가요?
SKT인 것 같아요. 일단 롤드컵보다 우승이 힘든다는 LCK에서 우승하고 올라와서 제일 기대가 돼요. 얼마나 잘할지.
So obviously SK Telecom because he heard that winning LCK is even tougher than winning Worlds, so he's really looking forward to it.
Well, the play looks on point. Flash Wolves are looking awesome. Boogie, thank you very much. G-Sun, thank you for translating. And we're going to throw back to the State Farm analyst desk.
Thank you very much, Riv. Looking ahead to that SKT matchup. But in a broader sense, the caliber of opponent that awaits these teams in the group stage, when you talk about IG defending world champions, SKT, and the likes of G2. I mean, those are some scary opponents.
I mean, personally, MSI is my favorite tournament because it's the Champions Tournament. We cut away the fat. It's just the lean competition. There's no third place that's boosting in.
But we need C9. We're North America.
Yeah,
They never win the title, but they do well at Worlds and International, so we need Worlds.
Yeah, well, we'll see how the new revamped Team Liquid does in the group stages, but if it doesn't go well, there'll be people calling for C9 instead. Earlier today, we saw those LCS champions Team Liquid sweep PVB to secure a spot in the group stage. A good start to their MSI run.
Yeah, but we were talking earlier about how good it looked compared to the two different series. And this one was actually a closer series. If you only watched the previous one, you would not know that Phong actually hung in there very closely. The fights were back and forth throughout the first 15, 20 minutes of the game, and then Team Liquid's superior mid-game team fighting would very quickly close the game out. But for those first 15 minutes, it was really scrappy like this, where it's just back and forth fights, and you're not quite sure who's coming out ahead. And, it was pretty standard drafts, not at all like the crazy stuff we were seeing.
And I don't want to take anything away from Phong Buffaloes, because I did like some of the looks that they gave today. Again, in some of those instances in these fights, it looked good for a second. But I also want the community to kind of like gut check themselves. Like take a step back and say, yeah, Flash Wolves, they look explosive, they look hot, it looks like they're just smashing their opponent, they're clearly better. Team Liquid aren't that type of team. That's not their play style. Any victory that they have isn't going to look like that. So was this game controlled? Did they play around their correct windows and their power spikes and the win conditions? And for me, most of the time, yeah, I think they're a low variance type of team. They try to go for the safer play. It's gonna be a bit slower. And I think that came out of this series, so I'm not feeling so bad about Liquid.
All right, a North American fan who has watched them all season is used to seeing these kinds of wins, where it's a little scrappy earlier for Team Liquid, maybe they fall 1 or 2K goal behind, and then they crush you.
Right.
And so, it was very in line with that. And I think, some of it for Phong Wu fans, you would have liked to have seen your team play around their win conditions a little bit better. That second game in particular, having such a strong top side of the map and taking forever to try and exploit it. Those are the kinds of things that moving forward in this tournament, especially for tomorrow, Phong Wu's going to want to clean up.
And Frost, it was mentioned that we didn't see as crazy picks in this first series, TL versus PVB, as we did perhaps in the Flash Wolves series. But I do want to talk about the way that TL approached this best of 5, because there were questions around, would Impact go back to some of those tanks who have received small buffs in the lead up to the tournament, or would he kind of choose to go the way of the rest of the top laners in the tournament and expand that champion pool into more carries? If we're to use those 3 games as an indicator, TL is looking to adapt to the tournament meta and attempt to play that.
Or at least have the viable option to do so. I also really like the pivot of taking the Akali and Jinsen, showcasing that on the international stage. I like the fact that when Sonateric wasn't give it to him, that they were fine to just play the champion paired up with the Tristana. So I like the different looks that I got from TL, and I'm not really concerned for them. I prefer when they play around their bot lane, it's like gangplank in the top lane. But if I don't get that every time, I'm not immediately slamming down the panic button for TL's top lane.
Yeah, I think this was that's kind of how the series was for me. I'm not slamming the panic button, but I'm not necessarily thrilled as, the kind of jaded North American fan.
Who hurt you guys?
TL did, just last year.
NA fans are just like,
that's who. I'll tell you who.
Unless you guys 20-minute perfect game, they're just no sweat. You're like,
I feel like
they
can't hurt us anymore if we downplay all of the expectations.
Frost had a great point at the top of the day about how much teams struggled in play-ins at Worlds, G2 and C9, and then made semifinals of Worlds. And so it's not super indicative, but it's just not I feel great.
I'll do you one even better. I actually think it makes the team stronger because, there's a bit abstract.
A little bit of struggle.
Yeah, let's go.
No.
Iron sharpens iron.
Stay with me, because the thing is I think a huge problem is caliber of competition around you. And the reality is that Korea can scrim China, China can scrim Korea. NA and EU, we don't have that advantage. You're basically sitting there on an island, you go off to international competition. The level up that you see from Western teams when they attend a tournament like Worlds that is so long because they get access to the boot camp, because they get access to those scrims, and how quickly they develop is massive. A team that goes into play-ins has much longer to do so. Now, will it count for MSI because it's a shorter tournament? Maybe not as much, but definitely for Worlds. So when you see your teams going to play-ins, I'd be like, thank God, we've got extra scrim time. This is basically playing a whole nother split. It's fine.
Yeah, I'm happy they're in play-ins. And I think, about the whole, did it inspire a ton of confidence? It's what we've seen out of Team Liquid. We know they're a great mid-game team fighting team. never really that lane focused. But I think the concerning part is not necessarily what we've learned this series, but like heading into the best of ones, which often get very crazy. Group stages of international competition, it's almost always the most exciting part because there's tons of upsets and things that happen. And they don't seem like a team that is going to do as well in a format like that. They're always a little bit more of that best of 5 team, and they play pretty standard to make smart adaptations, but they rarely surprise you with a draft pick.
Right.
And so in a best of 1 series, you know, that is something that you would be a little concerned about.
Isn't you guys' region best of 1?
It is best of 1, but they also lost.
But TL's not. Would not be considered the best of 1 team in the region. C9 would probably be largely considered the team that, given a game against any other team in the world, has the highest likelihood of taking
or even
that game,
TSM this last season where they played a lot weirder. The point overall is just that, like, if it is PvB that makes it through and it is, you know, Flash Wolves, you know, well, they already got
it is
through,
Flash
but,
Wolves
like,
and TL, yeah.
Like, those teams are both very explosive in the early game, and like one of those games that PvB played today could have been won if they were a little bit better in the mid game. And those are the kinds of games in the best of 1 that haunt you. When you drop that one game you shouldn't have dropped, and now you're not getting through because it's a super tight field.
Right. I think for me, as we talk about the 3-0, that scoreline does not necessarily inspire confidence. I think what does inspire confidence more than anything is what Riv heard from Kane at the top of the day around the things that they had worked on, which were specifically expanding champion pools, becoming more aggressive as a team, looking to close things out. I mean, it was a relatively quick series in terms of average game time, so that when they did have leads, they were able to close it out quicker than they typically were within our region domestically. And beyond that, it was evident to me, based on the Akali play and the 3 unique champions in the top lane for Impact, that they are putting time and effort into expanding those champion pools. Now the question is just, have they leveled those things up to a degree that they can actually be competitive against the top regions in the world?
And I mean, the same thing's kind of true for Flash Wolves for me as well, where it's just like, yeah, Team Liquid, there's still some question marks, but they looked pretty good. For Flash Wolves, it's going to be a really tight battle, I think, against Team Liquid for probably that 4th seed in group stage. I don't think either of the emerging region teams that we've seen play in the play-in so far have a chance of getting out. And I think G2 is really good. I think IG and SKT are really good. And so who's going to join them? And I think Flash Wolves looked, like we said, like the better, more dominant series so far. And we'll get a better gauge of how that relates when the two
teams they beat play
tomorrow.
I mean, I feel like I need to give you guys like a pep talk to build you up.
Did you not think Flash Wolves looked good?
No, but I'm just like, you remember that TL was a single tiebreaker game last time for making group stage. But it was, they had all
so let me then just ask it to you this way, Frost. Based on the 2 series we saw today, which one inspired more confidence in you? Which team do you think is better, Flash Wolves or Team Liquid, coming out of our 2 series today?
I'm going to say TL.
So you are going to say, okay, well then that's fine.
Did you expect something else?
Well, I mean, because earlier we were talking about how the series for Flash Wolves, even though 3-1, felt more dominant.
Yes, but I think the caliber of competition was very different, and it was a bad stylistic matchup. Now,
fair enough.
The thing is specifically, it's looking at, like, again, recognizing your power windows. I saw the same exact thing from Flash Wolves every single time, and I feel like I saw the best version of Flash Wolves. Yeah, maybe they can play around Hanabi a bit more, but you basically got what you thought you were going to get. Betty's popping off, Hanabi's playing a carry, and then there seems to be communication issues around the jungle. TL, I don't think I saw the best version of them, and what I did see, I was like, that's not bad. This is probably what I expected, but I think there's a higher ceiling here, which is why I lean towards them.
All right, fair. I mean, fair enough.
Yeah, player skill for Team Liquid, I think, is definitely in their favor. I think you can have some concerns about how does it work in a best of 1, but you know they look like the better team. Flash Wolves, I still think I really liked what I saw just in terms of decisiveness and being able to close out those kinds of games that are super important in a best of 1.
Right, and of course we could get into the weeds about how they match up against each individual team, awaiting them in the group stages. We won't do
That's a show for another time.
Exactly. So after today's results, Team Liquid and Flash Wolves will be advancing to the group stage, joining Invictus Gaming, SKT, and G2 Esports. Tomorrow, Phong, Vu, Buffalo, and Vega Squadron return to the stage to fight for that last spot, with the VCS champions looking to bounce back in front of the home crowd. Let's preview that final best of 5 here in the play-in knockout stage as both teams suffered a loss, one of them will get to go through and challenge as an emerging region against the other 5.
I think we kind of got the light preview of it today because, again, LMS and VCS share a very similar playstyle between Flash Wolves and Phong Vu Buffalo, and you saw that Vega Squadron really did get caught off guard when things were going fast. That said, Null had a really poor series, in my opinion, today. Made a lot of crucial mistakes, so Nomans is definitely a guy that can punish that. And I kind of think that, you know, Vega, maybe their time is out. Maybe they've shown all of their tricks, and if VCS is paying attention, like, probably should ban that Karthus, and you just watch that team roll over.
Yeah, I think we were seeing what else would come out of that bag of tricks, and nothing else really came out of it. And I think Big Koro has actually been having a pretty good tournament with Pallet, and so when you saw the bot lane of Gadget just getting destroyed over and over and over again, it kind of raises a concern where this seems to be one of the strong points for Phong Vu that they're going to have to overtake in the series.
Yeah.
And they're going to have to do it with cheesier picks that you've already shown.
I would never expect Vega to get their Game 1 draft from this series again. Possibly an iteration of that Game 2 draft where maybe they can shore up a couple of the misgivings of it. But even then, that's one game of a best-of-5. So the both of you would call the favorites in this matchup Phong Vu Buffalo. We did say they were in the better of the 2 groups anyway when it came to the play-ins.
Yep, definitely would give it to Phong Vu. I think the fact that they can mechanically go toe-to-toe with one of the top major, or the best region.
The best region in the world?
Yeah, best region in the world. Best team from a major region is what I meant to say. Best team from a major region. The fact that they didn't get outclassed mechanically, so it was just purely mid-game team fighting, is a good sign when you go up against the LCL representatives.
Well, that series comes tomorrow. Game 1 starts at 3 a.m. Pacific time. That's a change from today. That is 12 p.m. Central European Summer Time. So be sure to tune in for the countdown 30 minutes before all of that, and action begins. Now for myself, the cast of the entire live broadcast crew, thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow for more of MSI 2019.
A lot of these international events do come down to, do you rise to the occasion or do you kind of crumble under that pressure?
Ladies and gentlemen, here we are, the first best of 5 of the day. Team Liquid versus Phong Vu Buffalo. Winner of this series will advance to the MSI main stage. Jensen unable to connect on the ult, Null still alive. Double kill coming in for Big Koro. He's popping up in the backline, that's going to be a triple. He's looking for a little bit more, but Big Koro will go down. Jensen finding the kill. Null, though, on cleanup duty. Core JJ, the last man standing, the ace for Phong Vu Buffalo. The stun comes in, the stolen Sejuani turning the fight. The double for Big Koro, now wants to continue, but Impact does so much damage on the front line. The taunt comes out to save the day, but it is not enough. The shutdown coming through. Double it, looking to clean up.
Throw it, look it.
Oh, make some time.
Yeah, go left. Oh, nice there. Oh, Jensen died. Going mid.
Jensen's gonna lead forward, they're gonna try to take down Null, double lift as well. Xenos is ulting, but none of the members he needs to hit. They've gone golden, the Cosmic Radiance is everything that they needed. Big Koro knockback, double continue to clean up. Him and Jensen running through the enemy team. One more reset on the jump. TL dominate PvP on home soil, and they will qualify for the MSI main stage.
Flash Wolves take on Vega for a position in the MSI main stage. Gets stunned up, looking for the Void Rush as well. He'll go on but already he's dead. Rather taken out by Sanchez. Nomans continues to push forward here. The final hour, maybe the final shot into the hearts of Flash Wolves in this game. Boss looking to rejoin the fight. Betty gets the kill onto an Anasik. Nomans caught out as well. Flash Wolves find the double. Vega Squadron caught out in their own jungle. Bogey flashes forward with the knock-up, and it's all Betty all the time. Rather steals away the unstoppable on top. Betty's on the back line. Gadget's caught out. Gadget trying to do what he can, but Betty's just on a rampage. Surima's shuffle comes out, and Flash Wolves continue the fight. And Anasik has to flash away. This is just devastation. This isn't even funny as we see Nomans trying to slide onto the back line, but it's all Flash Wolves. There's nothing you can do. Nomans there with the unleashed power. They take down Betty. That's one. Boogie jumps on the back line though. Gadget shockwave back will fall, and Flash Wolves find the fight. Hanabi can just open up machine gun rides onto the faces of Vega. By Hanabi though, trying to catch Gadget and Nomans. He can just 1v3 this. Gadget's done. Hanabi, he's styling on some fools right now. Can they do it? He says, I'm pretty sure they can. Hanabi takes the Nexus, and Flash Wolves are going to the main stage. Yeah, I guess you can shrouds and you just swing your sword around. It's like, I'm scything.
I also wish we had the camera on you and that is the outtake.